בשם השם נעשה ונצליח. שיעור תורה, ברוכים הבאים. We are back in our Wednesday night Stump the Rabbi. Baruch Hashem, we've already done over 82 shiurim with questions, answers. Baruch Hashem, hundreds and hundreds of questions across the spectrum of Judaism that anyone that really wants an answer could easily watch the shiurim and get them, which is one of the things B'ezrat Hashem we'll discuss tonight. Tonight's shiur will be for a refuah shlema for Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Rav Ephraim ben Shulamit, David ben Esriya, Doris bat Jora, Esther bat Tzipora, Yitro ben Avraham, Talia bat Sarah, Abigail bat Surya, Orit bat Ilana, Michal bat Yael, Serach bat Batya, Stefan ben Katarina, and also for a Tzlacha Rabba of Marsha bat Julie, Ayla bat Marsha, Alexander ben Marsha, Samuel ben Marsha, Shaul ben Farzane, Yitro ben Avraham, Oshri ben Doris, Elad ben Doris, Gabi ben Doris, Reuven Chaim ben Pala Parel, Shmuel Yitzchak ben Pala Parel, Naftali Tzvi ben Pala Parel, and lehavdil also a Ilui Nishmat Rohula Yecheskel ben Yosef and Esther, and Ilui Nishmat Benjamin ben Abayich, and also for Atzlacha Rabba for our dear friend Richard Medina. Kadosh Baruch Hu yivarech otam bekol mikol kol, chaim arukim shlemim meleim Torah mitzvot gemilut chasadim nachat ubracha, to all of the wonderful people that help us do as much as we possibly can, and even beyond what we can, to get the Torah across the four corners of the world, Baruch Hashem. So tonight, Baruch Hashem, you guys have typically some good questions, and Kadosh Baruch Hu has been merciful on us to give us the answers, so we can move forward each week with more knowledge, with more tools to get closer and closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And this week's parasha, we see Parashat Mishpatim, which we talked about briefly last night. But one of the things that we should emphasize a little bit more, as we've talked about it many times, but we see that in the 23rd chapter of Parashat Mishpatim, in verse number 13, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Ubekol asher amarti alechem teshameru, v'shem Elohim acherim lo tazkiru lo yishma al picha." Be careful regarding everything that I've said to you. The name of gods of others you shall not mention, nor shall your mouth cause it to be heard. So this is a very interesting halacha, very interesting statement by Kadosh Baruch Hu to remind us again and emphasizing that we have to be careful, but not just be careful. Be careful in regards to everything. Be careful in regards to everything, even including what we allow into our mind. There's a emphasis here that we, with our own little small minds, human minds, don't really understand what the necessity is. I mean, we've already understood that all of this stuff is things that we should take seriously, since he says, if you don't do this, you'll die. If you don't do this, you'll die. If you don't do this, you'll get punished. If you don't do this, you'll die. It's over and over again. But yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu emphasizes once again that to make sure that we're careful with everything that we're doing, whether it's the not cursing our parents, not hitting people, not killing people, not being committing bestiality, not doing all, charging interest, all of these different rules that are mentioned here, but also including things that we may not necessarily think are such a big deal, such as the one that's mentioned in verse 7, midvar sheker tirchak, that from a thing of lies you have to distance yourself from. V'nakiv tzaddik al ta'aro ki lo yatzdik rasha. And also you should know that you should not execute an innocent or righteous, for I shall not exonerate the wicked. That you're never going to get ahead. You're never going to win, I should say. You're never going to win in the end if you go against the tzaddikim. And one of the reasons why people think that they could win against the tzaddikim when they do what they do is because of money. And that's why the very next halacha, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, "V'shochad lo tikach, ki hashochad ya'aver pikchim v'yisalef divrei tzaddikim." And do not accept a bribe, for the bribe will blind those who see and corrupt those who are just. So here we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, take everything that I say seriously, treat it very carefully, including things that you may not necessarily think are such a big deal, such as distancing yourself away from lies, from a thing of lies, from a statement of lies, from people that are liars, from a business of dishonesty, and so on and so forth. And don't let the bribes blind you, because don't think that you're going to be the one that is going to not look at money and say no, money doesn't talk to me. It's really more about doing good or whatever it is. Don't think for a second. Don't trust yourself for a second, because as he says, the shochad doesn't necessarily always have to be a bribe where you're giving money to somebody under the table or something, but rather a bribe where you have something at stake here. And Kadosh Baruch Hu says that the shochad, this bribe, even blinded those who see, meaning those that are smart. Typically they're smart, typically they're brilliant even. Typically they are people that are reliable, and even ones that are tzaddikim, even people that are righteous throughout all of their life have fallen for bribes. So here we see that the Torah is warning us time and time again about how to treat the laws, how to, in essence, treat ourselves. As the Mishnah in Avot says, don't trust yourself until the day that you die. So here we see that the Torah is emphasizing over and over again the rules that we have to take seriously. Now the question is, these rules that we have, some of them, people will tell you today, they may not be relevant. They may be something that is perhaps relevant to the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, the days of David HaMelech, Hiskiyahu. When the Torah was the dominant force in the world, maybe it was relevant back then, but not today, which, by the way, anyone that says such a thing is 100% a heretic, that you have to stay away from, not listen to. You're not allowed to learn from such people. And many people are coming to me lately with, unfortunately, after the fact, after they did not listen to past advice that we've given to the public, even in some cases to people directly, to stay away from heretics. Like, for example, as I mentioned a couple of times recently, this Apikolos Asher Meza, who does mass conversions like he used to do in Christianity. Now he just does it in the name of Judaism. But as I told you many times, he's just simply a Christian pretending to be a Jew. And this Apikolos, who likes his own opinion a lot more than the Torah, has more friends that are Christians and idol worshippers than he does Orthodox Jews, makes fun of the Torah on a regular basis, but yet he says that it's all in the name of the Holy Torah, where he wants to convert more people and invite them to Judaism, even if they don't live in Jewish communities, even if they don't really fit in to the Jewish halacha definition, and so on. He wants to convert the whole world, which again is not acceptable among Orthodox Judaism, or really Judaism in general. But he wants to beat the system. And quite a few people have come to me lately telling me that they've gone to him recently. They've become one of those people that fell for the trap, the so-called free conversion, which is really not free, just he pretends that it's free. And aside from that, it's a conversion that's even if it doesn't cost money, it was actually better off that if it would have cost you money, but actually been a legitimate conversion that somebody would consider. But the people that have gone to him, then eventually they want to move to Israel, or they want to move to a normal Jewish community, and in both cases, more and more and more of them are being rejected, and in some cases not rejected in such a nice way. I mean, they're treated like literally somebody that's an idol worshiper in some cases. They don't even consider them a half a Jew. Not that there's such a thing as a half a Jew, but literally they consider them as idol worshippers. They consider them as missionaries, and they frown upon it. And those that know who Asher Meza is don't even want to accept these people even after they convert a normal conversion, because of how bad of a reputation this Rasha has, with the rabbinical world. But unfortunately, the people that didn't know, or perhaps chose not to know, went to him, got their fake conversions, and now they want to join, the Jewish society in Israel or in America or other places, and they're being rejected. And then I say, okay, so what do I do now? What do I do now? I can't get accepted anywhere. You see, the problem is that what you do now is not necessarily going to fit in with everything that you've been taught until now. And the reason why is because everything that you've been taught until now is that you should do everything yourself. You should pretty much, put an X on the Rabbanut. You should completely disregard the traditional system. You should learn Torah up to your own understanding. And in essence, telling you what to do now is not going to fit in with everything you've been taught. Because what to do now, if you're in such a circumstance, is you have to abandon everything that you've been taught until now, erase it, literally pray that you forget every little bit of information you've learned from these wicked people, and restart all over, no matter how long it takes and how much money it costs and how difficult it is. And the reason why is because what to do now is what you were supposed to do from the beginning, which is to do tshuva. Now, by doing tshuva, every person has to do tshuva for different reasons. Sometimes people have to do tshuva for violating Shabbat. They're born Jews, and they didn't keep Shabbat, they didn't keep family purity, and so on and so forth. They have to do tshuva for that. Some people stole, so they have to do tshuva for that. Some people wasted seed, so they have to do tshuva for that, and so on and so forth. But a person that goes against the rabbis, a person that goes against the rabbinical world, not just specific rabbis that, he had an issue with, or even more so, wicked people that pretend to be rabbis, but he just simply put an X on the entire rabbinical world as you guys probably have a better imagination than I do with different terms that you want to use. And then the point is that, he just says, I'm going to do whatever I want. That person has to do tshuva. What kind of tshuva? Tshuva for ego. Tshuva for arrogance. Tshuva for literally every single thing from Aleph ad Taf. And the reason why is because up till now, you've been learning simply a different version of Christianity. You haven't learned Judaism yet. You've learned Christianity just from a Jewish perspective to some extent. When you learn from people like that. The same thing goes for these other teachers, so-called teachers or rabbis or whatever it is, that teach heretical teachings, because really what they all have in common, whether it's Manis Friedman, or it's Dror, or it's a Prager, or some of the other Mervis, and so on and so forth, and it's obviously Meza, is that in essence they all fall into the same trap that the previous generations, reformers and heretics and apikosim were falling into, which is that the Torah is there to soothe me. The Torah is there to please me. The Torah is there to fit into my life. The Torah is part of my life, but not life itself. And in essence, everything I just said is the opposite of the truth. When people are taught that God needs them, then they're being taught the opposite of Torah. When people are taught that you can take halacha into your own hands and simply look at any canister of food, the ingredients, and decide whether it's kosher or not based on your own understanding of the law, that's the opposite of the truth. When people think that teaching things that are scary parts of the Torah, which is the death penalties and the punishments and so on, is not supposed to be taught, but rather it's supposed to be more pleasing, more comfy, more like you're sleeping in, under your little poof, your little, blanket that you have over there, in your nice cold winter, and you're comfy, and you maybe a few jokes here and there to keep you awake, and not teach any fire and brimstone. When people tell you that stuff, that's the opposite of the truth. Why? Because in essence, they're teaching you that the Torah is in essence a part of life, but not life itself. And this is one of the things I want to discuss a little bit today. You see, when the Chachamim say certain things, they're not saying it just to scare you. They have better things to do with their life, especially the tzaddikim that toiled and toiled for decades upon decades, day and night, through poverty, through sickness, through agony, in order to arrive at the truth. I recently learned a letter that was written from between Rav Tzion Abba Shaul and Rav Ovadia, Aleim HaShalom, and it's printed in the Yabia Omer, the new section that was just published. I think it's Perek Zayin, and it was just published. And Rabbi Ephraim, God bless him, he actually is one of the people that helped publish this book, as they took many of the handwritten Divrei Torah that Rabbi Ovadia wrote over the years, but never published into a book. That's how many of the Chachamim, including Rabbi Ephraim, that's how they do. They write everything, all their chidushim, all their insights, all their everything in handwriting, old-fashioned way. And then somebody eventually, types it and edits it and so on and so forth and puts it into a book format. So they needed some people to help. And Rabbi Ephraim, God bless him, being an expert not only in Torah but also in writing, he was one of the people that Baruch Hashem helped in publishing the new book by Rabbi Ovadia that just came out recently. And in this book, Rabbi Ovadia has letter exchanges between him and Rav Tzion Abba Shaul. Now, you would think that when you write an halachic book, you're going to have, listen, I think A. What do you think? Oh, I think B. What do you think? Well, I think A because B is wrong. I think A because of this. And that's how people think. When people don't learn Torah, they assume a lot of things, and that's actually one of the things that Rabbi Ephraim said today in a shiur, which is really the biggest epidemic of the generation, is not a coronavirus, it's not even heresy, it's not Christianity, it's not. You know what it is? It's ignorance. That's the biggest epidemic of the generation. People are so ignorant in today's world that not only do they not know what the truth is, but they're at a point of such arrogance where they assume that they know the truth simply by reading a title, simply by knowing what the subject entails, simply by hearing a name. And many times you'll see comments under my own shiurim of these special people. Special in a more referring to like special ed really, but special people that you just published a shiur. The shiur is 2 hours and they make a comment already within 30 seconds of publication about what they think. Why? Because they didn't watch the shiur and they just read the title and assumed they understood the whole thing. The best yet is these chutzpanim, these rude people that have a lot of nerve, that don't stop sending me questions about things that I've discussed in the shiur without them actually watching the shiur. Like, they just send questions nonstop, and we try our best to answer, but I think we're going to have to change that policy because it's literally killing me already. how many questions we have to deal with every day, and to simply not answer questions of people that do not watch our shiurim. Why? Because the reality is, if you watch our shiurim, most of the questions you have, you will find it in the shiurim, Baruch Hashem. That's the siyata d'ishmaya that Hashem gives us. That's, Baruch Hashem, the Torah itself. And most importantly, that's really the way it's supposed to be. You cannot just go to a rabbi, ask him 500 questions, and never read any of his books, never watch any of his shiurim, never do anything, and just think that he works for you. And that's unfortunately what people do. And in essence, what ends up happening is that these very same types of people, they go to not only my shiurim, but I'm sure many other rabbi shiurim that allow comments and questions and so on, and they don't even watch the clip, they don't watch the shiur, but they immediately give you their opinion. This is a special type of chutzpah that exists in the world today as a result of ignorance getting to a level of extraordinary proportions, dangerous proportions, a epidemic type of proportions, in such capacity that you literally can be sitting right next to such a person right now and not even know it. You may even be one and not even know it. Now, if you're watching my shiurim on a regular basis, you're typically not one. Why? Because at least you're making the effort to learn. If you're watching even other rabbis' shiurim on a regular basis that are good rabbis, that are honest speakers, you're also most likely not one of them because at least you're making the effort to learn. But there are many people that just simply assume that they already know. And in this generation, there's so much ignorance in the generation that people don't even know what they don't know. And what makes them even more dangerous is that they assume they know because they read a few books, because they watched a few videos, or because they simply think they're smarter than their next door neighbor, even though their next door neighbor may not even be Jewish or learned or both. Now, the reality is, Rabotai, is that in any part of life, when you want to make it in life, when you want to succeed in life, you're never going to compare yourself to the losers unless you want to be a loser. What do you compare yourself to? You compare yourself to the best. You compare yourself to the people that you are admiring or you look up to or you want to be like and so on. You know, if you want to be a good banker, a good broker, a good fund manager, a good businessman, a good investor, you're going to read, the books and the writings of some of the best investors and businessmen and CEOs and so on and so forth. That's what you're going to read about. You're not going to read, the memoir of some homeless guy. You're not going to read a cookbook. You're not going to read what's last year's best stock picks that were picked by some online debate by regular investors. You're gonna look up the information from the best of the best, the people that have a track record of success. If you want to be the best scholar in a certain field, you're gonna read the work of the best scholars in that field, whether modern or past, and so on and so forth. But for some reason or another, in the Torah world, people think that they are smarter than what they are because they're not comparing themselves to the greatest. Rather, they're comparing themselves to their friends, they're comparing themselves to their enemies, they're comparing themselves to the average ignorant person running in the street. They're not comparing themselves to the sages. One reason is because they feel these people are more like they're so far removed, they're so far away from me, there's really no comparison, we're not in the same field. Or perhaps they are in the complete opposite spectrum where they think, no, there's really, it's just the only advantage that Rav Ovadia has on me and Rabbi Ben Zion Abba Shaul and all these others have on me is they learned for longer. So I really can't compare myself to them now because they were, 90 years old and 80 years old and I'm only 25 and 35 and 45, so I'll only compare myself to them later on. all types of stupid excuses. So who do you compare yourself to now? You compare yourself now to your peers that are next to you, your average guy in yeshiva, your average guy in a kollel, or in a bet knesset, or in a community. And in essence, because sometimes you know how to speak better than them, or you know how to communicate an idea better than them, or you're perhaps even smarter than them, you assume that you are the smartest guy in the street, so much so that your ego grows so rapidly that you start passing judgment on the sages. You start passing judgment on the rabbis, whether it be the local rabbi or the biggest rabbi in a community or in the world. Literally, within a matter of time, becomes just a normal for a person, which is the opposite of anything else in the world. Why? Because if you were going to go into the scientific world, philosophical world, or any other part of scholarship, you would only dare put yourself in the same sentence as one of these leading scholars if you were simply introducing their work, if you were simply admiring their work. Never passing judgment on their work, because you're not in the same world, you're not in the same field, you don't have the same capacity. But for the reason that we know of, which is the Yetzer Hara, but no logical reason, people simply think that they could just cancel out rabbinical opinion, cancel out the Torah's opinion, cancel out any opinion that doesn't jive with them so quickly, so rapidly, that they forget that they are still in the I don't know department. And many of them end up making mistakes because they assume that it's all based on acquiring knowledge, and if you just read enough books, therefore you will know. They don't realize that the Torah is not something that's acquired as a result of reading books, but rather the Torah is something that's gifted to you from HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a result of the sacrifices you make for it, part of which are learning books, part of which are more than just learning books. Physical sacrifice, spiritual sacrifice. And in this new section of Yabia Omer, you see the letter exchange from Rav Ovadia and Rav Tzion Abba Shaul, where Rav Tzion Abba Shaul tells him about how difficult his situation is right now, that he had a young daughter, baby, die, and he describes how it's the trauma of it, how horrible it was, and how horrible it is, and how his wife cannot stay home. She has to, in order to just contain herself, she has to keep going from place to place, and he has to be with her, and how much pain he's dealing with. And in the very same letter that he's sitting Shiva, he just completed sitting Shiva on this baby. Very same letter. He asked Rav Ovadia, and Kvodo, can you please tell me, what about, do you put a casket for such a baby? Do you, not a casket, the marble? Do you give the name? And he starts going into an halachic discussion. Who even thinks like this, we would think. But that's what the Gedolei Hador were like. They had emotions, but their emotions were connected to their Torah. They had Torah, and their Torah was their entire life. And in the very same letter that he's telling him he's dealing with suffering and anguish and so on, he's asking him about different halachic questions. And Rav Ovadia, I believe it was 5 days later, responds to him and tells him, gives him a whole lot of compliments of how much of a Gaon he is, and so on and so forth, meaning giving compliments to Rav Tzion Abba Shaul. And he tells him, first telling him that he obviously feels bad for the situation, but going back to the halachic discussion, as you know, when I had a daughter, when Rav Ovadia says, when I had a daughter die, we did this and this and this, and then he starts going into a halachic discussion, and they're discussing trauma in life, but in words of Torah, in a language of Torah. No, Where is God? Why is God doing this to me? What's going on? None of this garbage. None of these doubts, none of these confusions, are ever uttered out of their lips or inside their minds. Why? Because they understood that Torah is not part of life. Rather, Torah is life. And these discussions between the Gedolei Hador about their suffering, their anguish, the struggle of life is not a new thing, but rather it is common language among many of the Gedolim, talking about how much suffering they've endured throughout life. And now you would say, wait a minute, but didn't it say that if you follow the Torah, you do the mitzvot and so on, then Hashem will give you good life? Yes, He will give you good life. But remember, there's life that's this world, there's life that's permanent, which is the eternal world. Needless to say, some people get the benefit of both, some people get the benefit of one. But there are certain people, especially the tzaddikim, the Gedolei Hador, the giants of the world, that do not enjoy an ounce of this world, but that's by choice. Not that they pray for Hashem to give them suffering, but rather Hashem sees that their neshama is so elevated among the rest of society, so elevated among the rest of us nothings, that they can handle the light of heaven to a much greater capacity than we could ever even think of. Needless to say, they could also handle the pain that sometimes comes with it. And He gives suffering to some of the tzaddikim that is beyond the norm. As I've told you in the past, the Klosenberger Rebbe, alav shalom, lost his wife and 10 children in the Holocaust. And he wasn't the only tzaddik that lost 10 children in the Holocaust. But yet, after the Holocaust, built an entire empire of Torah. Rav Ovadia lost several children. Rav Tzion Abba Shaul is well known that not only did he lost child, but his wife had something like 9 or 10 miscarriages. Many of the tzaddikim have and continue to suffer. Rav Mazuz, when had to take care of his wife, and one time that she had the Hashem Yishmor, she had the disease, she had cancer, and one time that she was screaming from pain, and he came down the stairs to come help her. He himself fell down 2 stories and started screaming, and they ended up taking him to the ER. One time, one of the people we know went to visit Rav Mazuz, which is one of today's Gedolei Hador. He saw that he has a huge table, like one of these dining tables, and literally half the table is pills he takes every single day. He even said in a lecture one time, he has, since when Rav Ovadia was still among us, Rav Mazuz, because of his humility and his awe of Rav Ovadia, he, in essence, stayed behind the scenes. He didn't do as much as he did after Rav Ovadia went to Gan Eden. But after that, he started doing the big shiur that he does every week, and he also has a newsletter that's distributed, I believe, in something like 200,000 copies per week. 200,000 copies per week. People fight over his newsletter every week, over his write-ups newsletter. It's a Dvar Torah that he writes every week. I actually know the printer. It's a very, very nice guy, tzaddik. And anyway, the one time, they see him, he's suffering, he's in pain all the time, and someone mentioned something, and Rav Mazuz says, listen, if you have somebody else to take over the shiur, I'll give it to them right away. I mean, if you have somebody else that can give the emet to people that can do what I'm doing, I'll give them the shiur right away. so much suffering I have to deal with in order to give this shiur. If you have somebody that can do it, the same thing, I'll give it to them right away. Meaning, I don't want any kavod, I don't want any respect, I don't want any money, I don't want nothing. But at the same token, I can't just walk away from thousands of people coming to learn Torah from me. That I can't do. But if you have somebody that can do it, I'll give it to them right away. And of course, no one can fit his shoes, needless to say, sit in his chair. But many of the gedolim that people, freely dispute with, criticize, mock, and so on, are people that suffered for the sake of the Torah and never complained a moment about it. Because they knew, just like Job rebuked his wife when she said, why do you continue praying to this God if he keeps giving you the suffering? And he says, you despicable woman, when we took the good, we thanked him for the good. Now we're not going to thank him for the bad he's giving us. What do you think? It's being given to us from someone else? This is what he came out of his lips. In his mind, in his heart, he had some thoughts of why and who, and that's what the rest of the book of Job is, for almost 40 chapters, discussing the mental battle that he had, and in essence, but the merit that he had, that Hashem answered him. But the point being is that all of these tzaddikim had one thing in common. It wasn't their brain capacity. It wasn't their memory. It wasn't how much Torah they read. They all, of course, read a lot of Torah. They were all experts. They were all giants in Torah. But that wasn't the reason why they became Gedolei Ador. There are many people that read a lot of books, many people that know some books by heart even, but they're not only not considered Gedolei Ador, but in some cases even considered completely wicked. Completely wicked. Of course, most are not considered completely wicked, they're just not considered Gedolei Ador. Why? Because in order to get to that point, there is a mesirut nefesh, there's a self-sacrifice that HaKadosh Baruch Hu requires. And one of the places that we see this in the Gemara is in the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, as we all know, we learned last week, part of his story where Rabbi Akiva came from two righteous parents. He had an extraordinarily righteous wife, Rachel, his first wife, became very wealthy later on in his life, remarried after his wife Rachel, the Tzadikah, died. But here the Gemara in Masechet Brachot, in page 61b, talks about the end of the life of Rabbi Akiva. And for the sake of time, I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit because I know you guys have a lot of questions. So the Gemara says, the story of what happened at with Rabbi Akiva at the end. And I promise you there's going to be a little bit of a different version than the one you've heard so far. פעם אחת גזרה מלכות הרשעה שלא יעסקו ישראל בתורה. Once the wicked regime, the Roman government, the Roman Empire, decreed that the Jewish people should not engage in the study of Torah. No more shiurei Torah, no more teaching, no more nothing. They knew these Romans, they weren't ignorant like the heretics of today. These Romans knew that the way to hurt Am Yisrael is by hurting their Torah. And Papus ben Yehuda came and found Rabbi Akiva as he was convening public assemblies and engaging in the study of Torah with them. Papus comes and he sees Rabbi Akiva. He's having a huge shiur Torah in public, hundreds and thousands of people. Papus ben Yehuda was a tzaddik. Who was Papus ben Yehuda? Papus ben Yehuda, the Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit, page 18, says there were two tzaddikim, Papus and Lilianus, that when the Romans, one of the Caesars, his daughter died, somebody murdered her, they blamed the Jews, because, the Christians, they don't know how to murder. The Goyim, they don't know how to murder. They murdered billions of people, but only the Jews, according to them, they know how to murder, so they blamed the Jews. And they said, if the Jews don't give us the people that murdered the Caesar's daughter, we're going to kill everybody. So Papus and his brother Lilianus both came to the sea that says, we did it. Even though they didn't do nothing. They were two tzaddikim, but they knew that it's better that they get killed rather than the entire people. And they ended up getting killed, and the Rambam writes that they died on Kiddush Hashem. They were Kodesh Kodeshim. They joined Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues that all died. They were all the martyrs of Am Yisrael at that time. And here, this is the story. This is the story that connects the two. So Pappus comes to Rabbi Akiva, and he says to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva, you're not afraid of the regime? Rabbi Akiva replies to him, I'll give you a parable. He says to him, well, why are you teaching Torah to the public like this? You're not afraid? I mean, there's a law. There's a law. They said whoever's going to teach Torah in public, they're going to kill him. You're not afraid? Now, wait a minute. Pappus is a tzaddik. Pappus, some even say, was a Tana. Was a Tana Kadosh. He actually is mentioned in several places in the Gemara, having different debates with Rabbi Akiva. He's a holy Kodesh Kodeshim. Of course he knows Torah is important. So what kind of question is this? That's the first question we're going to ask. What do you mean? What do you want us to do? Not to learn Torah because they say don't learn Torah? Torah is going to go in the garbage den. Am Yisrael will go in the garbage den. How can we not learn Torah? So of course, there is a deeper meaning to this question. That's question number one. So, Rabbi Akiva gives an answer. He says, I'll give you a parable that will explain my actions. What is the situation of me teaching Torah in the public comparable to? To a fox. A fox who was walking alongside a river and saw fish, many fish, that were gathering from place to place as they were fleeing from something. So the fox says to the fish, from where are you all running away from? So the fish responded to the fox saying, we're running away from the nets that people are bringing to catch us with. So the fox said to the fish, is it your wish that you come up to dry land where you will be safe from the nets, and we shall dwell together, you and I? Just as my ancestors dwelt with your ancestors? So the fish said to him, are you the one they describe as the cleverest of the animals? You are not a clever one, but rather a fool. So far, so good. Fish are swimming away in a hurry. Fox asks him, where are you guys running away from? Where are you swimming away from? We're swimming away from all the nets that the people are coming down the river. They're coming to catch us. We're swimming away. The fox says, come on the land. Come with us. We're going to hang out, have a barbecue together, chill out. I'll protect you. Don't worry. Fish says to him, people say you're the smartest guy in the street. You're the dumbest guy in the street with such a suggestion. You're the dumbest fox in the world. Why is he dumb? Why so dumb? If in the climate, the fish says, if in the climate that sustains our life we are afraid, in the climate that will induce our death, should we not be afraid all the more so? It says, if we're afraid in a place that we are comfortable, that we could swim, that we don't have to depend on anybody holding us and feeding us and anything else, we could just fight for ourselves. If the place that we're most natural, if we're afraid in our natural climate, shouldn't we be even more afraid in a place that's not so natural? So comes Rabbi Akiva. He says, and so too is the situation with us, Pappus. Now, as we sit and we engage in the study of Torah about which it's written in Deuteronomy 30:20, Kiyu chayecha ve'och yamecha, for it is your life and the length of your days. We are nevertheless threatened by such danger. If we would proceed to remove ourselves, to absent ourselves from the Torah, we would be endangered all the more so. So, Rabbi Akiva says to him, if learning Torah, where we're supposed to be, if we're, if we don't learn Torah, you think that's going to save us? Opposite. It's going to hurt us not learning Torah. And the Gemara continues, just a matter of days later, until Rabbi Akiva was caught. They threw him in jail because he was teaching Torah to the public, where he would spend the rest of his life in this prison until they murdered him in a vicious, horrific way by peeling off his skin little by little each day and selling it in the meat market. Hashem Yishmo. But first he was put in prison. He stayed there for some time, and the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin and other places says that he continued having access to speak to the other sages and paskin halacha while he was in jail. One halacha we learned about his treatment of rabbinical mitzvot, where he would refuse to eat because he didn't have enough water to wash his hands and to drink. So he says, I'll just drink. He said, yeah, but why do you have to wash your hands if you don't have water? You only have enough water to drink. Then you don't have to wash your hands. Just eat the bread anyway. He says, I'd rather not eat than go against one single halacha, one single idea that my dear rabbis have said. The rabbinical mitzvah. It's not a biblical mitzvah. He says, I'd rather not eat, starve myself to death, than to go against a single rabbinical mitzvah of netilat yadayim. So that's one of the things that we hear later on in the Gemara. Talks about Rabbi Akiva being in jail. But as he gets to jail, shortly later, Pappus ben Yehuda is also arrested and confined right next to him. And Rabbi Akiva says to Pappus, what brought you here? Like, what'd you do? Well, you weren't teaching Torah to the public, so what happened to you? Pappus replies to him, Ashrecha Rabbi Akiva shenitfasta al divrei Torah. Fortunate are you, Rabbi Akiva, for you were apprehended on the account of the words of Torah. Oy lo lePappus shenitfas al dvarim betelim. Woe unto Pappus, meaning he's saying woe unto himself, who was apprehended on the account of meaningless things. So now we're going to stop here at this point and ask ourselves, what meaningless things was Pappus doing? Rav Baruch Ber Leibovich in Birkat Shmuel, section 4, asks the question, what meaningless things? Pappus was a tzaddik. What meaningless things was he doing, and what got him in jail? I just told you, Gemara Masechet Tanit, page 18, says that Pappus and his brother, Lulyanus, they admitted to a crime they didn't commit in order to save Am Yisrael from being massacred. That's what he went to jail for. That's what he's going to be killed for. That's the end of his life. And this, he says, is meaningless. Meaningless. Now, Rav Baruch Ber Leibovich says, is sacrificing your life, your physical life, for the sake of Am Yisrael, not just sacrificing your life to save somebody from getting hit by a train, not just sacrificing your life and let's say donating a kidney, but rather sacrificing your life for the sake of Klal Yisrael. Meaningless at all, needless to say, meaningless in comparison to teaching Torah to the public? It's meaningless? You and I and anyone else that wants to use their common sense will immediately say, absolutely not. This guy is a hero. This guy is a tzaddik. This guy is the best of the best. But he himself, Pappus himself, and not from humility, is saying, Ashrecha Rabbi Akiva, that you sacrificed that you are here in jail and you're going to die here and all this stuff is going to die because you were teaching Torah, and woe unto me that I got to the same point as you and I'm going to die here also. But it was only because I sacrificed my life to save many Jews from being murdered. Woe unto me. Rav Baruch Ber Leibovich says, yes, Pappus is right. Not that we need Pappus, not that Pappus needs us to tell us that he's right or anyway. But the point is, Rav Baruch Ber Leibovich says, Papus is telling you 100% emet. It's not humility. It's 100% da'at Torah. It's 100% the opinion of the Torah. Because as we know, we learn from this week's parasha, midvar sheket yichak. You run away from things of lies. He's telling you 100% of the truth. What's the truth? Even sacrificing your physical life, needless to say, money, time, skill, whatever, all of that is meaningless. Meaningless in comparison to teaching Torah. This is hard for people to accept when they have an ego that's just as big as them. Why? Because everyone likes to be patted on the back, even if that pat comes from themselves. Everyone thinks that their work is unique. Their opinion is special. Their efforts need to be appreciated. They need to get credit, the credit for it. They need to be applauded for it. They need to be celebrated. Why? Because he built something. He took you somewhere. He gave you something. He gave you money. He gave you a building. He built you a website. He bought you a car. He donated. He did this. He had the idea. He connected you with this one. She connected you with that one. I did it. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me. This rabbi wouldn't be as big if it wasn't for me. That rabbi wouldn't be where he was if it wasn't for me. Little do they know, Da'at Torah, from the Gemara, from the story of Rabbi Akiva himself, is everything you can do in the world is meaningless in comparison to teaching Torah. Even if it's the ultimate sacrifice of your life, and even if it's sacrificing your life to save the entire nation, it's never going to be as significant as you saying Dvar Torah to your family, you saying Dvar Torah to your community, you teaching Torah. Never. Why? Why is it that way? So Rabbi Yaron Reuven says that first and foremost, the question that Papus asked Rabbi Akiva initially was not as simple as we think. Meaning, Papus was a tzaddik. So obviously he knew that at that moment was called Shat Shmad, which was a time where the Goyim, the Romans, were trying to destroy us, massacre us, destroy the Torah, and so on. And we have protocol, halachic protocol of how to behave during that time, where the Goyim are trying to destroy our Torah, where in such a time, where it's called Shat Shmad, even if they tell us that we're no longer allowed to tie our shoes right foot first and then left foot, or if you choose otherwise based on the Gemara, left foot and then right foot, whichever one you want. There's Shulchan Aruch opinion, there's Gemara opinion. Doesn't matter. There's a custom. Let's say it's the smallest custom that you can think of. Let's say the custom of how you wash yourself or tie your shoes. And they tell you no longer allowed to do this custom. If that's being done in public, that's called Shat Shmad. You have to sacrifice your life for a custom. Needless to say, if they tell you now allowed to keep Shabbat or learn Torah, which is not a custom but rather an halacha. So Papus knew that this is what is a Shat Shmad. This is a moment where the Goyim are trying to destroy Am Yisrael's Torah. And at that moment, we are obligated, not supposed to, we're obligated to sacrifice our life. So it wasn't his question to Rabbi Akiva saying, why are you teaching Torah? That wasn't the question. His question, Rabbi Yaron says, his question is, why are you doing it in public? Meaning, you could still teach Torah, send them a quick, chidush on WhatsApp or something. Hey guys, listen, I have a chidush today. Moshe Rabbeinu, he did this and that. Send a quick little shiur, 10 people. Why does it have to be, so big and get the attention of the goyim. You're talking about anti-Semitism, you're talking about government, you're talking about this, you're getting so much attention, you're publicizing it on the internet, you're spending money, you're doing all these things. Why? Why does it need to be so big, Rabbi Akiva? That was the question. It wasn't a matter of teach or don't teach. Of course teach. But why does it have to be so massive? Why does it have to get so much attention? Why do you have to go and egg on the missionaries and all the enemies of Am Yisrael? Why do you have to do it that way? So Rabbi Akiva says, your question, Papus, is like the question of the fox. It's a silly situation. Why? There is no such thing. There is no such thing as teaching Torah on a smaller scale than you're able to. There is no such thing. You have to publicize Torah in the biggest, most awesome way that you can, but not just any Torah. Torah emet. Meaning, you have to teach them about Gehenom. You have to teach them about the judgment. You have to teach them about the emet. You have to teach them about Mount Sinai. You have to teach them about what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said if we listen and if we don't listen. You have to teach them the difficult things, the easy things. You have to teach everything completely. No discounts. What about if they're not going to come back? What about if you're going to get in trouble from the goyim? What about if it's illegal? What about if people are not going to like you? What about if you're not going to get any likes on YouTube? What about all these things? You don't take any of that stuff into consideration. None of that should be part of your consideration. Every shiur, you put everything on the field. Everything. Why? You have no idea what power could be in a single shiur, meaning what impact it could cause in the world. You think, with your words, Papus, that we should just teach Torah just to save ourselves because the Torah is part of our life. Comes Rabbi Akiva and says to him, Papus, the Torah is not part of our life. The Torah is life. The Torah is life itself. Without it, there is no life. And not just without it, just let's say we keep Shabbat and we keep Tarat Mishpacha and quietly we learn from... No! Without having the ability to share the Torah with all of Klal Yisrael, we are simply not living. Why? Because we're going to be judged not just on our own Torah, but also on our brothers, because we have an halacha called Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lezeh. We're all responsible for each other. Now, you may know Torah enough to keep Shabbat. I may know Torah enough to keep Tarat Mishpacha in Shabbat. You may know Torah to do this, this, and this. I may know Torah to do this, this, and this. That's great. But what about Steve over there? What about Shmuel over there? What about Ethan over there? What about David over there? They don't know all that stuff. So what, we're just going to leave them, and just because we don't want to get corona, and just because we don't want to get in trouble, and just because the government hates Jews anyway, and just because all of this, we're not going to teach, we're just going to let these people go to Gehenom? Absolutely not. It's like, yeah, but do it small, and hopefully it gets there. No, Papus. Torah is life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave it to you. It's a gift. But it's only a gift if you know how to use it. If you know how to use it, teaching it is the most important thing in the world. More important than your health, more important than your financial standings, more important than your reputation, more important than your bank account, more important than anything else in the world. If you don't know how to use it, then it'll be like a poison for you. Because the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah says, someone that learns Torah without an intention of teaching is like someone who does not have a God. Why? You have to have an understanding of this, not just learning Torah, but teaching Torah that's critical. Now, if you're not able to teach, whether it's because you don't have the knowledge, or because you don't have the time or the ability, whatever the case is, that doesn't make you a bad person, it doesn't make you less significant.
so long as you are supporting those that are teaching Torah Emet, so long as you are respectful to those that are teaching Torah Emet, so long as you understand your position versus theirs. Why? Because the Torah Kedosha says you have no idea how much can happen in a single shiur. One of the examples that I learned from Rabbi Ephraim is of what can happen in a shiur Torah. I mean, I could tell you many of the examples from my own shiurim, but I can tell you what's written in the books as well. The Ramchal, Rabbi Chaim Moshe Luzzatto, was one of the Gdolei Ador about 300 years ago. In Igeret number 24, page 65, he writes that his biggest student, his most accomplished student, he writes a letter to somebody else, to his rabbi, and he tells him, I want to tell you about my most accomplished student. This student is a miracle. He's a miracle, this student. Who is this student? He says, this student is a Baal Tshuva. It's a Baal Tshuva of his. He made him do Tshuva. When he found him, when he met him, this guy was a mean. This guy was a missionary. This guy was a missionary, a Jewish missionary, going against the Torah, not keeping any mitzvot, not keeping Shabbat, not keeping kosher, not keeping zero. And not only not keeping, trying to get other people not to keep. That's who he was. And the Ramchal says, after talking to this person, not only did he do tshuva, but he became such a tzaddik. His name was Avraham Firarisi. Avraham Firarisi has now reached the level of midot of a Chassidut. You know, the Ramchal had in his Path of the Just, Mesilat Yesharim, he has a levels of Avodat Hashem, who's the higher, all the way to prophecy, Ruach HaKodesh, then prophecy. He says he already has reached Midat HaChassidut, this Avraham Firarisi. Where was he? He was a mean. He was somebody that was literally a missionary that the Gemara says if he falls into a hole, you don't save him. In fact, you're even allowed to push him into a hole. That's how dangerous this person was. He says he's now my Baal Tshuva. He's my best student. He got to the highest level. Got the highest level in Chassidut. And that's from what? From teaching him some Torah. So then the Ramchal in Igeret 53 says there's a question that always has been asked. It's a question that I delved into. It's a question that fascinated me for many years. I mean, this is the Ramchal who had angels teach him Torah every day, different angels. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. All the sages came to him on a daily basis. I mean, this is somebody that's unbelievable personality just 300 years ago. Just 300 years ago. The Ramchal says in Igeret number 53, he had one question that was something that he dug really deep in order to get the answer for. He says, since all Hashem does for us is for the sake of good, everything that he does is good. We know this from Rabbi Akiva, we know this from Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu, we know this from across the Torah. So since all Hashem does is for the good of his people, for the good of Am Yisrael, how is it that he allows the nations to make it hard for us to learn Torah? Because in essence, what's the point of life? What's the point of life of a Jew? To serve Hashem. How do you know how to serve Hashem? Learn Torah. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to learn Torah, because that's the way you're going to know how to serve Him, and if you serve Him, you're going to be fulfilling your purpose, then why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu make it not only difficult to learn Torah, but such an extent that your life is on the line, just like the story of Rabbi Akiva? Story of Rabbi Akiva, you teach Torah, they end up killing him. Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu do such a thing? So comes the Ramchal and he says, we see this from the answer to this, the Prophet Yechezkel. Prophet Yechezkel, chapter 14, verse number 5. למען תפוס את בית ישראל בליבם, אשר נזורו מעלי בגאוליהם כולם. In order to seize the house of Israel, for what is in their heart, although they have withdrawn themselves from me with their idols, all of them. So Ramchal says, comments on this verse, he says, Am Yisrael sinned with idolatry. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to do tshuva for this idolatry, to seize Am Yisrael, to get them back, it's not that they just have to do tshuva for the act of idolatry. That's a certainty. They have to do tshuva for the idolatry, but also they have to do tshuva for what was in their heart. Meaning, what was in their mind? What were they thinking? They have to do tshuva for the thought that they had. So the Ramchal says, from here we learn that tshuva is twofold. Tshuva is twofold. You have to have two tikkunim. One tikkun is for the action itself. The second tikkun is for thinking that you should be doing this, thinking that you should be cheating, thinking that you should be lying, thinking that there's another God, thinking that money or politicians or anything else will save you other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thinking that in itself requires a tikkun. And that you're going to have to get from the Torah. So the Ramchal says, so now somebody who didn't learn Torah his entire life, how is he going to do this tikkun if he doesn't even learn Torah? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I want to save him. I want to save this guy is with a non-Jewish woman. This guy is cheating. This guy's lying. This guy became anti-Semite Jew. This guy's self-hating Jew. What am I going to do to save this guy? I'm going to make Esav. I'm going to make Ishmael pass a decree that forbids learning Torah. Forbids learning Torah. At the moment it forbids learning Torah, his neshama that's been ignored, his neshama, the Jewish neshama that has been ignored, and that has been abused, that has been damaged, suddenly sees that there isn't an ability now to learn Torah. That neshama will overpower his physical desires and will yearn for Torah to the point where it will sacrifice its physical self for the sake of Torah and be willing to die for it even though he never learned it. And that's why we see times like the Holocaust and times with the Bet HaMikdash, people that were Reshaim Gemurim, never learned Torah, Apikosi, made all types of sins, but the moment the Goyim told him, listen, I want you to make a sin on top of the Sefer Torah. I want you to burn the Sefer Torah. I want you to desecrate the Bet HaMikdash, do things like this. They said no. And the Goyim told them, if you don't do, we're going to kill you in a vicious way. And they said, kill me in a vicious way, I'm not going to do it. And you see Jews that literally live the life of heresy, live the life that's against the Torah, sacrifice their life for the sake of Torah. How? That's what the Ramchal is saying. Ramchal says, their neshama the whole time knows that life is the Torah. It's not part of life, it's the Torah. And the body ignored it all this time. But now that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this decree, the neshama can't take it anymore and it's willing to die for it. It's willing to die, and that's how it's going to rectify the two tikkunim. Two tikkunim, the one is the physical, one is the spiritual aspect of it. So when we have Rabbi Akiva telling Papus, what you're saying is right. What you're saying is right in a sense that if the Torah was just part of our life, but because the Torah is our life, it's the greatest thing in the world you can possibly do is to teach Torah in the highest capacity, in the loudest voice, with the most amount of emet. And Papu says to him, Ashrecha Rabbi Akiva, Ashrecha, that you did that and I did something meaningless. What did I do? I'm just going to die for the sake of saving Jewish people. That's it. You're going to die for the saving the Torah. You saved the entire world. This, Rabotai, gives us a little bitty understanding of who the Gedolei Hador was, what is Da'at Torah, what is really our responsibility, how we treat people that learn Torah, people that teach Torah. And I'm telling you, the shiur is as much for me as it is for you, because it's one of those things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting us in test after test after test. And there's every reason under the sun to cancel shiurim, to delay things, to do other things. But when you learn things like this, all of a sudden your suffering doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter anymore. And you have to just push yourself even further. And I can tell you, I mean, the people that know me best, and people that see a little bit of my personal life, other than my wife, no one really knows the things that we really deal with on a day-to-day basis. A couple of close students know different things. One thing that that pushed me to do this shiur and yesterday's shiur has been this teachings. Why do I need pushing? I just had a surgery 2 days ago. On Monday, I had a surgery in my mouth. I could barely move, talk, do anything. Before this year, I was in pain. After this year, I'm going to go back in pain. Yesterday, I was in complete pain. My whole mouth is jacked. But, if you notice, during this year, no one even knew. No one can know. Why? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, before the shiur, I don't really need you to feel that great. After the shiur, not so much either. Not so much either. It's not like other people have been. During the shiur, special health. Why? People need to learn Torah. People need to learn Torah. And this is not the only story. This is one of many, many stories where you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling you, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. This is the most important part. Okay, so if it's the most important part, why don't you just make me feel good? No. It's not about that. You need to do it, and I'm going to test you to see if you're going to do it. I'm going to test you to see if you're going to do it. Why? Because that's the Tikkun. That's the Tikkun, Rabotai. Anyone that comes into this world thinking that they're coming to this world to relax and enjoy and sit there with their legs up and having a cup of orange juice or tea or something is dreaming. Is dreaming if they think that way is how they're going to establish any significance in the world. This world, Adam la'amal yulad. A person came to this world to toil, and toil doesn't just mean reading books. Toil means sacrifices, physical sacrifices, financial sacrifices, and otherwise. The bigger you want to be, the more sacrifices you're going to have to make. But those sacrifices begin with destroying your ego and bowing your head down to what the Da'at Torah is. And Da'at Torah is not always going to agree with you logically. Da'at Torah is not always going to agree with you rationally. But so long as you put your head down for the sake of the Torah, you're always going to win in the end. With that being said, Rabotai, let's start with some questions. Hopefully it was fruitful enough and beneficial enough for all of you to know that it was worth the extra time that we spent covering it. Let's see. I have some. I did a blessing before. Okay, first question. Leah Levitan. Question. What should Jewish parents do if their kids are playing at a public playground and non-Jewish or secular kids start playing with your kid? That's a very good question. If your Jewish kids are normal, then they're not going to see as much of a difference between themselves and the other kids. They're just going to see them as kids. They're not going to think about their religious beliefs and so on and so forth. But you have to do the thinking for them and you have to pay attention. So, as long as those other kids are being nice, polite, not being violent, they're not teaching them anything that could hurt them, there's no problem with your kids playing with the other kids, even if those other kids are secular or otherwise. There's no problem whatsoever. But if those kids are violent, if those kids are saying things like that are problematic spiritually and things like that, then of course you remove your kids there as fast as you possibly can. And quite frankly, it's sometimes you'll see that kids that look religious sometimes don't act very nice also. It's not just secular kids or non-Jewish kids that don't act nice. Sometimes it's religious kids or kids that look religious that act terrible, and vice versa. Sometimes you see that your kids are the ones that are not acting nice and the other kids are acting nice. So the point is that you always have to judge things fairly. And again, when it comes to children, it's okay for kids to play with other kids as long as you're overseeing it, as long as you're seeing that it's just playing and it's not nothing beyond that. that's not a problem at all. And actually even have a tshuva from the Chazon Ish. They asked the Chazon Ish in his day, are you allowed to send your children to a kindergarten that's run by a secular teacher? You're allowed to send it to kindergarten. Now, obviously, kindergarten is not first grade, second grade, third grade. Kindergarten, your kid's 3 years old, 2 years old, 4 years old, whatever it is. Can you send your kid to a secular kindergarten? Because everyone knows there's no question about sending your kid to a school, yeshiva. Once you're at 6, 7 years old and you go to school, there's no question about sending him to a secular school. It's forbidden completely. The Midrash Ma'am Loeh says sending your kids to a secular school, public school or a non-Jewish school is a violation of the 10 commandments of idolatry. It's considered idolatry. So now there's a different question. Are you allowed to send them to a secular kindergarten? The Chazon Ish said, and this was in Eretz Yisrael. I'm not sure if it necessarily would be relevant in the exile, because the answer that the Chazon Ish said would require the person to probably be Jewish. Which is, what was the answer? He says, if the teacher, the secular teacher, is willing to put Jewish sages' pictures on the walls instead of these Zionist leaders, instead of these politicians, they would put the rabbis' pictures on the wall. They would put the Baba Sali, they would put Rabbi Akiva, they would put Rabbi Shimon, they would put all of the sages' different pictures on the walls, even if whether they're real or not is irrelevant, but they're willing to put the pictures of the rabbis on the wall instead of the pictures of politicians. Then you're allowed to send your child to a kindergarten that's run by a secular teacher. Kindergarten, not first, second grade, third grade. Kindergarten that's run by a secular teacher. Why? He says because at that age, through 3, 4 years old, the child is going to be affected more by what they see than by what they hear and so on, like a older child. So if they see that the heroes in this kindergarten are the rabbis, are the tzaddikim, then that's what they're going to want to be. But if they see that the heroes are some Zionist politicians, businessmen, then that's what they're going to want to be. That's what they're going to be influenced by. So it's important to have the pictures. That's why it's also one of the reasons why we ourselves, when I first started doing tshuva, I didn't understand why do religious people have pictures of rabbis on their walls. It seemed to me like idolatry. Completely wrong mentality. To have pictures of tzaddikim on your wall should be a must. It's not a must, but it should be a must. It should be a must in every Jewish house. Why? Because your kids are going to get influenced by the things they see. They see cars, they see houses, they see toys, they see this, they see that. They see stuff. If you don't show them on a regular basis, not just when they open a book, if you don't show them on a regular basis pictures of tzaddikim and say, that's the hero, that's the superhero, that's who you should be like, that's who Abba wants to be like, that's who everybody needs to be like. These tzaddikim, that kid is not going to look up to tzaddikim. He's going to look up to houses and cars and all types of other nonsense. So it should be a must to put pictures of tzaddikim in your house because it's good for education, especially little kids. And that's why, Baruch Hashem, we had the merit to put a bunch of pictures of my house recently full of tzaddikim. Why? Because it's good for the kids, and the kids love them. They have a relationship with each one. It's unbelievable. They say, the Chida. My daughter loves the Chida. She even looks like him, so it's interesting. And my son, he loves it. It's very interesting. The point is, highly recommended to put pictures of tzaddikim. But to go back to your question, if the school is a kindergarten, not school, the kindergarten is a Jewish kindergarten, but it's secular, as long as they're willing to put pictures of tzaddikim on the wall, the Chazon Ish says it's allowed. If it's a non-Jewish school, there is no question you're not allowed to send them there. So that's that. But as far as playing in the playground, if it's just play, as long as you're supervising it, it's perfectly fine. As long as you or your wife or you or your husband are supervising the kid or somebody responsible is supervising the kid and sees it's just playing, it's perfectly fine. Good question. Recently, nutritionists, doctors, etc. have been talking about how dairy is not healthy for the human body. However, the Torah specifically talks about dairy food, so does that mean that these people are incorrect, since doctors are constantly changing what is considered healthy, or that Hashem permits eating dairy but never says it's good for us? Obviously, everything in excess is not good. And that's the answer in essence. That's the answer. Now, yes, the food has changed. Food has changed, just like people have changed throughout the generations. There are different illnesses that exist today that didn't exist back then. There are, the food itself is very different, and it's processed and so on today than it was back then. In those days, you'd have to consume your milk relatively quickly. There was no refrigeration and so on. But does that mean that milk is not good? Milk is not good for some people, and milk is perfectly fine for other people. Every person has to, see where they're at, how their body reacts to it, because it also, depends on how this person grew up. But one thing I can tell you is that the general advice by the nutritionists and the doctors that they give, that they just pretty much cancel out a certain food for everyone, is wrong, because it's simply not true. Some people actually prosper as a result of eating food that they consider bad, and vice versa. I can give you one example that we learned ourselves. It's very common in America that to tell parents to never feed their babies, their children, peanuts, because kids are allergic to it. This is common advice. I remember when we heard it, I found it to be completely absurd, and my wife found it to be completely normal. We had a little bit different upbringing. I grew up in Israel, she grew up in America. So I told her, this is complete nonsense. She said, why is nonsense? I said, I grew up on Bamba. I was a little kid. I grew up on Bamba. Bamba is peanuts, corn, and so on. I think back then they were making it still from peanuts. Today it's like corn and peanuts. Bottom line is, peanuts were normal consumption in a baby. And that's how you grew up. Literally, from the minute you can move your mouth, you start eating Bamba as an Israeli kid. That's how we grew up. For the doctors to say, the nutritionists to say it's not good, complete nonsense. So, Baruch Hashem, I have the best wife on planet Earth, and she listened, she said, okay, fine. So we gave our kids Bamba as little kids as their snacks. And guess what? Not only do they like it, but Baruch Hashem, they don't have the allergies that many American kids have to peanuts and so on. And the same thing goes with other countries that feed their kids peanuts and things that Americans don't think are good. You see that those kids that are in America end up having more allergies than kids in Europe, than kids in Asia, and so on and so forth. So many times when they simply, this cancel culture that they have also applies to how they look at food, where they try to pretty much make you into a cow. Just eat grass as if, and that's going to make you healthy. Grass doesn't necessarily make you skinny. I mean, cows eat it all day. They're not exactly skinny. But for some reason or another, society wants you to be like a cow. They want you to eat, grass all day or the likes with flavor coming from some lab. Some people, it's not good for them. Some people, it's perfect for them. Each person has to review, know his own body, see what works for them, see what doesn't work for them. In general, the most important part of food is to make a blessing. Thank Hashem that you even have it. Second part is, don't make food your life. Don't make food your life. There are some people that literally spend hours upon hours upon hours a day, thinking and preparing their food. Either thinking what they're going to order or what they're going to make, or preparing it. They take 2-3 hours a day cooking food that's going to take them 15 minutes to eat. I believe that it's a complete waste of life. It's a complete waste of your purpose in life. Food should not take up that much time in your life. Sure, I, like everybody else, would like to have something good to eat, of course, but if it's going to take that much more time to make it, it's simply not worth it. Unless it's Shabbat and there's a special reason to make it. Generally speaking, the way you're supposed to look at food is you are eating to live, not living to eat. Just take whatever you have, as long as it's not poison, eat it, and move on with your life. Go learn some more Torah, go do some more mitzvot, and make sure you do a first blessing and last blessing. People that make food into the priority in their life generally don't have very happy lives. Now, is that the best health advice? Again, it depends what a person consumes or what a person doesn't consume. But I can tell you that there is, both people that are perfectly fit, 35, 40 years old, that drop dead from a heart attack, just as there is, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old people that do not watch their health in any way, shape, or form, but still live a life that's perfectly fine. Why? Because that's decided by Hashem. Now, does that mean that a person should consume everything that's in front of him and become a pig? No. Obviously, every person should never do anything in excess, like you mentioned. But at the same token, I think people spend way too much energy evaluating food, this, that. If it's good for you, eat it. Not good for you, don't eat it. I wouldn't spend so much time analyzing the different things all day. I think it's a waste of time. Now, if somebody wants to lose some weight, if somebody wants to feel a little bit better as a result of losing weight, sure, they're gonna have to change their diets and so on. But I think that's a preference, not necessarily a obligation. Either way, a person should do the best they can to protect their body, but don't make that the number one mitzvah in your life. Some people, they say, listen, the halacha is you have to protect your body. You're right. The halacha is to protect your body. But it's not more important than learning Torah. It's not more important than shlom bayit. It's not more important than kashrut. It's not more important than the rest of the Torah. Yes, you have to protect your body, but don't make that the entire 10 Commandments. Some people make physical health their entire Torah. Just like some people make going to see the Rebbe on their entire Torah, or going to Uman, their entire Torah, or whatever other craze that people have, their entire Torah. No, Torah is big, Torah is enormous. Most important part is to learn it and go over the whole thing, and again and again and again and again, and to get closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Each and every part of your life should add to your servitude of Hashem. If you can see that the Rambam writes it actually before he talks about all the details of health advice that he gives, of what to eat and how to eat and so on, all these the real details. The Rambam actually writes that everything that you're doing should be done in such a way that you're serving Hashem through it. Meaning that when you're about to eat that carrot or that steak or that whatever you're about to eat, even that piece of chocolate, find a way to serve Hashem through that. Think about the glory of Hashem. Think about how amazing Hashem is that He put beautiful taste in this thing. Think about how amazing it is that He put so many nutrients in this thing. The point is that find a way to use the food, whatever food you choose to eat, as a way to serve Hashem. That will make you a lot healthier than any diet in the world. Why? Because that is a spiritual diet that will benefit you in this world and the next, whereas the other diet may make a person have a six-pack, may make a person have a keg, but needless to say, it will only serve him in one world. We want to focus more on the eternal world, which is beyond this world. David. Purim being on a Friday this year, how do we celebrate it, and when exactly, especially if we are not allowed to have groups in our city? What about the Megillah readings? We're going to discuss Purim a little bit more once we get a little closer to it. The Megillat Esther is something that you have to hear from a person. You cannot listen to it on Zoom. You cannot listen to it on a recording. You have to listen to it from a person. If you are concerned about coronavirus and things of that nature, then you have to arrange for somebody to come to your house and read the Megillah for you. I would suggest that if you have somebody like that in your community, to already make arrangements now, and make sure that you are giving him some money and promising to give him some money for doing it ahead of time, so he actually shows up. This is typically, there is at least one person in every Jewish community, if not more, that goes around different houses and reads the Megillah for the sake of the women. Every year, the women have a tough time going to the Knesset to hear the Megillah, so usually there's somebody that goes to the houses and reads the Megillah for them. So, if you have somebody like that in your community, then make arrangements for him to come to your house and read the Megillah. But if you're going to have, 10 people in your house, then really there's no reason for you to bring anybody to your house to read the Megillah. Just go to the Knesset. You already have a lot of people. It doesn't really make sense that if you're going to have all your friends come to your house anyway to listen to the Megillah, instead of, being selfish, just everybody go to the Knesset and hear it. But either way, remember that Purim has several halachot. One of them is to hear the Megillah, is also to give the machatzita shekel, which is actually starting this week, to give the machatzita shekel. Machatzita shekel is based on a third of the value of an ounce of silver, which is approximately $10. We're going to start a campaign like we do every year for anyone that wants to donate their machatzita shekel for us to give it to poor people. That's one mitzvah of Purim. There's also matanot le'evyunim, which is a separate mitzvah to give to the poor. And then there's also mishloach manot. Mishloach manot. So these are other mitzvot in Purim. You have to make sure that you fulfill all of those. Getting drunk is not an obligation in Purim. What a person should do is to drink a little bit more than what he drinks during the year. But if he knows that he has even a 1% chance of making a sin as a result of him getting drunk, because that's how he is. He's the type of guy that makes sins, says stupid things, does stupid things. Once he's a little tipsy, then he should not drink wine to the point of getting drunk, but rather drink just a little bit more than what he drinks typically. So let's say, for example, if he drinks a little bit like this during the year, then he should drink just literally 1% more, and that's it, go to sleep. Without getting drunk, without getting a buzz, without getting nothing, just go to sleep and wake up later that day. That's what the Rambam says, that he should drink and go to sleep. He doesn't say drink to get drunk. So the point is that people that get drunk as a result of them wanting to fulfill the mitzvah, and because they're fulfilling this so-called mitzvah of theirs, they end up making a bunch of sins. They start cursing, they start making all types of other crimes, and they act like fools, make chilul Hashem, and so on. Not only is it not a mitzvah, it's a sin, and it's a sin that they're going to have to pay very dearly for. And like I said, it's highly, highly recommended not to drink on Purim, unless that drinking makes you serve Hashem better, because you know yourself that when you drink, you have more chidushim in Torah, that you're more comfortable sharing, you're more likely to sing, because typically you're a shy person, so now you're going to sing and dance and celebrate the day. That's fine. But if you know that as a result of drinking, you're going to start falling over yourself, possibly punching your friend, yelling at your wife, hurting your kids, looking like a fool, do not drink. You're not allowed. It's a sin. It's a sin. It's a sin. And that sin is a lot more dear than any mitzvah you can possibly imagine. So it's most important for people to know that the Purim is a auspicious time to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's an auspicious time to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's the fast of Esther, there's the time of Purim itself. It's an auspicious time to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because that's a time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a salvation. So if you're going to be a drunk fool during that time, not only are you making sins, but also you're missing out on an opportunity to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at a day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is known to have given us our salvation, whether that salvation is your own personal salvation, to get a zivug, parnasah, good health, and so on and so forth, or it's to pray for Klal Yisrael, to have the same thing, parnasah, to have a tshuva, to have more Torah, and so on and so forth. Doesn't matter. Point is that you're missing on that opportunity, and that's why you should spend your time on Purim celebrating, but celebrating in a kosher way. So again, I think most people in the community should be able to simply go to the shul to listen to the Megillah. You know, you want to put those dog masks on, you can put the dog masks on. You don't want to put them on, then obviously it's better that you just stay home and have somebody come to you and you know, cover your face when they come, because don't make them uncomfortable. But you know, the point is that there's no permission to recuse yourself from those mitzvot. You have to do whatever you can to fulfill those mitzvot. I can tell you myself, it's a little difficult to fulfill the mitzvah in this new community that we're in, because there's really nothing here. You know, anything that I have, any synagogue that I have to go to is going to be a nice drive, 20 minutes or so from here. So we'll have to figure out where we're going. Please do not ask me where I'm going. Don't, you know, a lot of people like to ask me, oh, where are you going? Where are you going? Don't ask me where I'm going, for two reasons. Number one, I don't know. Number two, just because I'm going somewhere doesn't mean I want to see you there. When I go to Beit Knesset, I don't want to see anybody. I want to go pray. I want to leave. I don't want to socialize. You know, I know that may sound nasty, but let it be nasty. I don't want to see people I know in a synagogue. I want to go pray. I want to leave. So people always ask me, oh, where are you going? Where are you going? Don't ask me where I'm going. Okay? Because again, I don't know, and also I don't want to see you. With all due respect, I love everybody, but when I go to synagogue, I want to go, I want to leave. That's all I want to do. People want to socialize. Oh, what are you doing? Then they think that it's Stump the Rabbi live. Start asking me every single question they had since Yetziat Mitzrayim. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. This is and especially during Purim where I have to go back home so my wife can go. So again, for anyone that's asking, don't ask. Don't ask. Please, have some mercy on me. Holidays are, and Shabbat are for my family. They're not for the public. Next. Reuven, should a person learn Chassidut? If he wants to learn Chassidut, he can learn Chassidut. But Chassidut is not priority over the foundation. Meaning, we have an obligation to learn Torah. That's, you know, we have to learn the weekly parasha, Shtay Mikra V'Echad Targum. Okay, Shtay Mikra V'Echad Targum is learning the weekly parasha twice with commentary, the onkelos. But if you don't have onkelos, then Rashi would suffice. So if somebody reads the weekly Chumash parasha, but with commentary by the Lubavitcher Rebbe or commentary by some other rabbi, they're not fulfilling the halachic requirements. Why? Because the halachic requirements is onkelos, and some people say Rashi also. Okay, so you have to learn that. Secondly, a person has to learn halacha. Now, if they are in Chassidut Chabad, and they're going based on the Shulchan Aruch Harav by the Baal Tanya, that's perfectly fine. If they are, different Chassidut, they want to learn the halachot of their shitot of their rabbis, that's perfectly fine to learn the halachot of their rabbis. But that's halachot, that's usually not Chassidut. The third thing is you have to learn Gemara. Once a person knows how to learn Chumash, knows how to learn a little bit of halacha, they have to start moving on to learn some Gemara. Why? Because Gemara teaches you how to think. You don't learn Gemara, you're never going to learn how to think like a Jew. So you have to learn Gemara. And you have to also learn some Musar. You have to learn some ethics. If you want to learn Chassidut, real Chassidut, Chassidut and Musar are sometimes synonymous. It's just the shitot of the Chassidim are very similar to the shitot of the Baalei Musar. Sometimes a little different, sometimes the same. The point is that whether you're going to learn this or that is not as important of whether you fulfilled your obligation of the others. If you see that learning Chassidut is making your Avodat Hashem better, meaning you're able to exercise your You're learning of halacha better. You're learning of Gemara better. You're learning of Chumash better. Your prayer is better. Everything is better. Sure, go ahead, learn Chassidut. It's good for you. But some people, Chassidut is a poison for them. Why is it poison for them? Because they don't understand the significance of Chassidut. They don't understand how to treat it. They think that Chassidut is everything, meaning that all you need to do is to learn Chassidut, and they don't even know what Chassidut is, where they think that all day they need to just learn stories of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid Mimezrich and the Rav Zalman and so on. Yeah, the stories are amazing. They're Maaseh Merkava, sure, they're all great. But they are not priority over halacha. They're not priority over Gemara. They're not priority over the weekly parasha. They're not priority. They're all secondary with all due respect to Chassidut. Chassidut is beautiful, but it's not priority. You have to learn the Torah that we're obligated by the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch obligates us to learn all these other things. And the person needs to know that they need to learn all these other things as priority. If he's either going to learn Chassidut or Shulchan Aruch, he has to learn Shulchan Aruch. If he's going to learn Chassidut or Chumash, he has to learn Chumash. If it's Chassidut or Gemara, he has to learn Gemara. Why? That teaches you how to think. That teaches you how to be a Jew. And if you don't learn the other things, even your Chassidut is not going to be good. You know, there are many people that pretend to be Chassidim. They can tell you every story since the exile, but they don't even know how to be nice and polite to a person in the streets. They don't even know how to be a decent husband. They don't even know how to be an honest businessman. But they can tell you a lot of stories from the Chassidim. They can tell you a lot of different things that Zalman Miliadi did, and a lot of stories of Rabbi Zusha. And they can tell you a lot of different wonderful things, but they're still crooks. They're still secular people that look religious. So a person needs to know, Chassidut is to take you to even a higher level than you're required to be. That's what Chassidut is. Chassidut is, you have gone to a point where you're doing all of the basics, and now you're going to use Chassidut to do even more than the basics. More than the basics includes the basics. It doesn't remove the basics. So you have to do everything that says the basics and more. If you can handle that, surely you can do it. There's a lot of beautiful things in Chassidut, whether it's Chassidut Breslev, or Chassidut Gur, or Chassidut Tzantz, or Chassidut Chabad. All of the Chassidut have their own pearls in them. A lot of tzaddikim, kedoshim were the ones that sacrificed their life for them, and each and every one of them was an extraordinary Talmid Chacham in the basics of Judaism, in the foundation of Judaism. That's why Rabbi Nachman Breslov says in Lekutei Maharan, if you want to be a student, you have to learn Shulchan Aruch, you have to learn Poskim, you have to learn Tanakh, you have to learn the Gemara, you have to learn Mishnah, you have to learn all of the basics, Zohar. Then you start learning his books, he says. A lot of people that, the Baalei Tshuva, and or even not, they say, oh yeah, all I'm going to do is learn Lekutei Maharan. You're not listening to the Baal Lekutei Maharan. The Baal Lekutei Maharan didn't tell you just learn Lekutei Maharan. The Rabbi Nachman Breslov never told you to learn just Lekutei Maharan. The Lubavitcher Rebbe never told you to just learn Lekutei Maharan. The Baal HaTanya never told you to just learn the Chassidut. He told you to learn the halacha, the everything else. So if a person is doing everything else and using Chassidut to elevate himself even higher, chazak ve'ematz, chazak u'baruch. But if they're making Judaism just Chassidut, they're making a mistake, and they're not going to be not Chassidim and not nothing. So it's very important to know that there is a big mistake in the world today where people think that Chassidut is its own religion, which is a mistake. So it's Chassidut is a way to serve Hashem higher than the norm, which requires the basics. It doesn't cancel out the basics. Okay, Joseph is asking, if it's only a sin that kills the person, like Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa says, Masechet Brachot, and children can't bear the iniquity of their father, like it's written in Yechezkel 18, then how come Benjamin, Kilav, Amram, and Ishai, who were all sinless, ended up eventually dying? Well, the same Gemara that mentions that these four died, even though they were sinless, that very same Gemara says that they died because of the original sin. The original sin of Adam and Chava, which brought death to the world. Everyone has to die at some point because of that original sin, because every single neshama was inside Adam HaRishon, meaning every single neshama has a part of that original sin, and therefore has to die. This is also why there are different mitzvot that we have in the world that are in order to fix that original sin. For example, the mitzvah of lighting candles. The mitzvah of lighting candles for Shabbat is a mitzvah both for the husband and the wife, not just for the wife. So how come the wife is the one that lights the candles? Typically it's the husband. He's the one that puts on tefillin. He's the one that does the kiddush. How come it's the wife that does the candles? Because Chazal told us she is lighting the candles, even though it's a mitzvah for both of them. It's both for the husband and the wife. And if there's no husband, the wife does the kiddush. If there's no husband, she still lights the candles. So how come even if she has a husband, she has to light the candles anyway? Because the tikkun, the whole purpose behind the lighting of the candles, is the tikkun of the original sin, of just like Chava is the one that incited our husband to sin and brought darkness to the world, brought death to the world, she is relighting the world through the candles of Shabbat. So that's the thing. So everything has a purpose, but all of it starts with Adam HaRishon. Second, are the Sfirot merely attributes of God, vessels? I don't answer Sfirot questions. That's more Kabbalistic teachings that I shy away from for two reasons. Number one, I'm not versed in Kabbalah, and number two, even if I was, I wouldn't be teaching it to the public. So sorry about that. I can't answer that question. Next question. On Shabbat, are you allowed to ask Hashem for things in prayers except for forgiveness and tshuva? Very good question, Charlie. On Shabbat, you're supposed to ask Hashem for spiritual things. Spiritual things like to make your Talmid Chacham, to open up your mind, to love the mitzvot, to love the Torah. But as far as other things like asking for money, asking for other things, no, that's not for Shabbat. On Shabbat is a time to connect to Hashem and to thank Him for everything, and the only thing you're allowed to ask is for spiritual things. Spiritual things, but physical things, money, things of that nature, that's inappropriate to be asked for on Shabbat. Ilana is asking, אתה מארצות הברית? כן, אני מארצות הברית, אני גר בפלורידה, ומרצה ועושה שיעורים. Ethan, what are the exceptions of calling the Gentile cops on a Jew, i.e. murders? Oh, what are the exceptions? Okay, so when are you allowed to call the police on Jewish people? Yeah, because traditionally you're not allowed to call the police on or the government in general on Jewish people. That would be a sin of being a rodef. So if, let's say, for example, you don't like your friend, and you decide to call the cops on him so they can torture him, forbidden. It's an Isur Torah. A person will be put on cherem, and a lot of huge punishment for somebody that's a rodef, and also someone who calls the authorities. It's an extraordinary sin in the Torah. Second thing is also, let's say some people are wicked. They call the authorities like the IRS or the some type of authority on their competitors in business, even though their competitor is a fellow Jew. They call the IRS. Oh, listen, I think this guy is cheating on his taxes, or I think this guy is doing this, doing that. These are all sins. You're not allowed to call authorities on your fellow Jews unless that person is a threat to society, meaning murder, pedophilia, rape, things of that nature. If that person is a threat to society, then you will be doing a service to society by going to the authorities. And we learned this from the Gemara that has a story of Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Elazar was, in essence, a person that would take the thieves and all of the other criminals to the authorities. And one of the losers, I can say, of the community hated Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, even though he was a tzaddik. He hated him because he went to the authorities of the goyim, and the goyim would either incarcerate or kill these wicked Jews. He said, "You are like vinegar, while your father, the tzaddik, is wine." Even though he was really wine himself, he was really a tzaddik himself. So this got to the heart of Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, and he did some cheshbon nefesh, he did some self-accounting. He said, "Am I really doing the wrong thing or the right thing by bringing Jews to the authorities, even though they're wicked? They're a threat to the public. So how could I know? How do I know if I've sanctified myself?" So the Gemara in Masechet Bava Metzia says that Rabbi Elazar, he was a very, very big man. So big that him and another tzaddik, when they would put their stomachs against each other, a bull was able to walk under them. That's how huge they were. They were very, very big, but he was an extraordinary Talmid Chacham. And part of the reason he was so big is because his own father, Rabbi Shimon, fed him a lot of food because he knew how much power he had and how he was using it for the sake of Torah. He would literally eat a lot more than a typical person, but then he would learn for 2-3 days straight without break. So it was a big tzaddik, and he would use this food and this strength that he got from the food for the sake of Torah. But anyway, one time he asked the Chachamim to do a surgery on him, what we would call today a liposuction. And he told them to take out some fat from his body, and so because he needed it to find out. So the Gemara says, the whole details over there, talks about how they put him on a granite table, which today we know that's what they use because it doesn't have the germs and so on. And they gave him a sam, they gave him a certain drug that was the original anesthesia. They put him in sleep, and then they took out 3 buckets of fat from his body, which if you go to a liposuction doctor or a specialist would tell you it's not possible with today's technology. It's not possible, meaning that Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon and the sages of 2,000 years ago had better technology than it's available today. Anyway, they took out 3 buckets of fat from his body, and after he came back, he took those 3 buckets, and he put them on top of the roof. In a obviously hot weather. And of course, if you take a piece of steak, you put it on top of your roof here in Florida or in Texas or any other warm climate, within a matter of seconds there's bugs on it. Within a matter of hours, you're going to already have worms, and in a matter of shortly after, some maggots too. So he wanted to see, had he sanctified his body from the Torah that he was learning and exercising, including taking these wicked thieves and murderers and so on to the goyim authority, did he ruin himself, his sanctity, his holiness, or was he still holy? How is he going to know? To see if the bugs would attract to his body, because if he's a complete tzaddik, the bugs, maggots, nothing can't touch his body. They run away from it. It's too holy for them. So he took 3 buckets of fat with the blood, with everything on it, put it on a roof, came back at a later time, which I believe, from my memory, it may have been maybe like a week or 2 later, like a long, long time after, which any normal situation, even with or without tzadikut, would be full of maggots already by then. He came back a while later, nothing, not even a single fly on it. Meaning that he sanctified himself so much that not only was his neshama holy, his body was holy, including this act of protecting the public by taking these wicked people to the authorities. So again, if these criminals are hurting society, murder, rape, pedophilia, stealing, things of that nature, you have a permission to go to the authorities, and in fact, you have to go to the authorities, because if you don't, the blood that they spill is on you. There's blood that they spill on you. So if you know somebody is a pedophile, if you know somebody is a rapist, if you know somebody is a murderer and the like, and you know it, and you don't go to the authorities, the next victim that they do that to, that sin is going to be on you, because you had the ability to stop it. So it's important to never ever stay quiet. There's unfortunately a bad instructions or leadership in some communities, that Jewish communities, where they try to keep everything hush hush inside the community. Now, I'm not in total disagreement with keeping everything within the community. To go anything major, go to the rabbis, go to the Bedin, have them deal with it, and that's fine. As long as the rabbis can deal with it, that's great. The problem is that many times, not only do they not deal with it, they actually enable these pedophiles to continue raping kids in Jewish communities for years. For years. These rabbis, these religious figures, these average guys that live in a community literally pick off little kids in a community and molest them for years. And no one says a thing in some cases. That's 100% a sin on the leaders of those communities that knew it and did not say anything. If they didn't know, then they should work a little bit harder on being a leader. But if they knew and they stayed quiet, that crime is 100% on them. 100% on them, and they're going to get punished for it severely. There are, unfortunately, many kids that have, throughout history, that have gotten hurt in both Jewish and non-Jewish communities. It's not just a Jewish thing. It's obviously non-Jewish that do it, and through our research for the wasting seed Tikkun HaBRIT movie, I watched some videos of criminals that were pedophiles. This one criminal that was a coach in a high school, he admitted himself to having over 1,200 victims. 1,200 victims. He literally said he would get 5 new kids per week. 5 new kids per week he would pick off the public school, kids that would come to his gym class, his team, this, that, for years, for 20 years. He had over 1,200 victims. Hashem Yishmor v'Yatzil. Another Satan, demon guy had over 300 victims. 300 kids. He said, the woman asked him, how do you get so many? Where? He goes, I just pick them off. No, I go to the playground. I go to the gym. They come to my class. I go this. I give them some candy. I act nice to them. Or he said, one case, Mamash, I couldn't sleep for days. Now I'm thinking about I'm probably not going to be able to sleep again. This guy said he would go to toy stores. And he would see that the kid is just there by himself in a toy store. And he'd say, kid, you like that toy? And the kid would say, yeah. He said, I'll buy you that toy. And he would buy the kid the toy, take the kid and the toy out the store, and do whatever he wanted, and then throw him back in the store after he finished with him. I mean, these sociopaths, these pedophiles are the furthest from normal. If anybody knows of such a person and does not go to the police and does not publicize this all over the place, they are a pedophile themselves. They are a criminal themselves, and that's how they're going to be judged in Shamayim. That's how they're going to be judged in Shamayim. So, you have in your hands information that about a person, and you know that this person is a danger to society, and you keep it to yourself, you are a murderer. The blood is going to be on your hands. And unfortunately, Rabotai, I can tell you from knowledge that these child molesters, these pedophiles, they're everywhere. They're in the Jewish neighborhoods, they're in the non-Jewish neighborhoods, and usually they look nice, they look friendly. I remember we had, when I grew up, there was this one guy, this one piece of garbage guy. He was, he looked like a kid. He looked like a kid, but he was like 35 years old. But he had like one of those childish faces. Looked like a kid. His name was Chris. And he looked like a kid. And he was a short guy, but he was 35 years old. He was older than everybody. He would hang out with 12, 13, 14-year-olds, run around with them and everything. And everyone thought, what's up with this guy? Oh, I know he's really nice, he's really fun. And he pretended to be a psychic or something like that. That guy, later we found out, that guy was not only homosexual, he was a pedophile. He was a pedophile, that guy. So, and he was roaming around the neighborhood, and all the parents would invite him to the house. Oh yeah, it's so nice that you have an adult playing with the kids. It's so nice of him. He didn't even live in the neighborhood. He would come literally to our neighborhood, and he would literally look for whoever he can do, whatever he can do with. Guy was a pedophile. We found out later on. So these pieces of garbage exist everywhere. If you don't watch your kids, you are responsible. You are responsible. Even more so, if you know your friend, family member, neighbor, your parent, your husband, whoever is one of those people, and you do not go to the police and get this person arrested. You don't go to get this person under control. You don't publicize this all over the world and warn everybody that this person is a predator. All of the crimes they make is on you. All of it. Why? Because you knew. So there's no permission whatsoever to keep this stuff a secret, and the communities that keep it a secret are literally killing the kids of that community. And that's unfortunately why we have many kids that grow up and they become disassociated from the community. They hate it with a passion, and no one knows why. It's like, wow, you grew up religious, you were the best in class, all of a sudden, you don't like Hashem, you don't like Chumash, you don't like nothing. And I tell you, no, listen, I like Hashem, I just don't like the religious people. Why? Why don't you like? I don't want to talk about it. I had bad experience. What bad experience? And only after you get to know the person, or the person just can't hold it in anymore, do they tell you the traumatizing experience they had with a neighbor, with an uncle, with a rabbi, with whatever. Sometimes it's women. There was this wicked woman in Australia that molested like 80 girls, and before she got arrested, or maybe more even. Point is, it's both men and women. It's sick society, and this is actually one of the byproducts of pornography. That's what happens when people watch pornography, but that's a different story altogether. Point is, if you know people that are this way, you have to report it. But not just report it to your mommy and daddy, not just report it to your best friend. You have to go to the authorities. But you have to make sure that you know. And it's not just like, oh, he looks gay, so therefore he must be a child molester. Although he's a sinner for being gay, it doesn't necessarily by default make him a child molester. Even though child molesters are typically gay. They don't really care about what's in front of them. But not all gay people are child molesters. Same thing goes with he's a non-Jewish. Not all non-Jews are child molesters. Some of them are very nice people and far away from being child molesters. And not all religious people and rabbis are child molesters. So you have to understand, you have to know, you have to have some knowledge. Now, I'm not saying you have to literally see the guy in action, but you have to have indisputable evidence that this is it. You have pictures, you have, the guy said it, there's knowledge. Knowledge that this is the case. Even if he acts weird with certain comments that he makes, you have to still at least keep an eye on that person and make sure to keep some type of monitoring of what's going on, and don't be closed-minded if anybody comes to you with new information. But either way, point is, if a person is a danger to society, whether that's society, the Jewish community, or otherwise, you still have to report it to the authorities. That's why the Mishnah in Avot says that part of what a Jew needs to do is also pray for the stability of the kinghood of whatever country they live in. Not that you have to spend half your day listening to politics or admiring politicians, but rather you just need to pray for the stability of the kinghood of where you live, because if it wasn't for the authorities, if it wasn't for the police and the army and so on in each country, the people would kill each other in the streets. So it's even having the authority that's run by non-Jews that are sometimes very unethical people, or Jews that are unethical people, still is better than not having it at all. Because you see certain countries, like some places in Africa and in other places, that literally do not have any authority, or the authority is afraid of the people. It's mayhem over there. You can't survive a day without seeing 1 or 2 or 3 or 80 crimes. So it's having authority, having police, having a government, having an army has its benefits, and but again, if you use it when necessary. Okay, 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll finish. Do converts get assigned a tribe when the Mashiach comes? Yes, when Mashiach comes, not now. David, is eating chadash a prohibition or is it a stringency? Well, I mean, it's you have to. If you have access to it, you have to. If you don't have access, then no. Joseph, don't poke Asher Meza with a 10-foot pole. He refuses to accept reward and punishment and is a messianic. Rabbi. Oh, I guess you're just making a comment. Okay, fine. David. When a Sephardi man marries an Ashkenazi woman, what minhag should the marriage ceremony follow according to halacha? Also, is there a problem with Sephardi man wearing a kittel in a marriage ceremony? So the minhagim in a marriage follow the husband. In a marriage, not just a wedding, in a marriage in general, they follow the husband. So if the husband is Sephardi, then the woman by default, his wife, becomes Sephardic. She cannot continue practicing Ashkenazi rules if her husband is Sephardic. She has to be Sephardic like her husband. If her husband is Ashkenazi and she's Sephardic, she has to adopt the Ashkenazi rules. That is one of the things that a woman needs to do. She has to follow her husband. If she doesn't want to follow her husband, then she should not get married. Because she's going to be a bad woman. She's going to be a bad wife. There is an entire section in the Rambam, that talks about bad wives that not only don't want to follow what their husbands say, but sometimes they want to torture their husbands with not giving them intimacy, and they want to use their own so-called Torah knowledge to do that. So why? Because the ketubah says that the conjugal rights, intimacy between a husband and a wife, is an obligation on the husband, not on the wife. Meaning that on the ketubah that you sign in a marriage, the husband is obligating himself to provide for his wife, to buy her clothing when she needs, and to also be intimate with her whenever she wants. She does not have to be with him whenever he wants. Okay, there's no obligation there. She's not obligated with pulvu. She's not obligated to bring kids to the world. The husband is obligated. Okay, but if the wife is refuses to be with her husband, not just once, but on a regular basis, she doesn't want to be with her husband, she is called a moredet. Moredet meaning she is a rebel. She's considered a rebel according to halacha, the Rambam writes. Now, if she continues to do this, he has to go to the rabbis. He has to go to the Bet Din. The Bet Din sends her a notice and say, you have to stop this. You have to be with your husband. You can't not be with your husband. But she says, no, I don't want to be with them because I don't feel like it. Or one of these sad excuses. Then they tell her that you have to be with them or you have to leave. He has to kick you out and not give you ketubah because and you have to give him back all the gifts that he gave you because he didn't give you all those gifts for a wife that's not going to listen to him. But if she says, no, I want to be with them, but I'm not going to be with them, meaning I'm going to be with them but not going to be intimate with them, they send her a notice, and if she does not follow the rabbi, she doesn't go back with her husband and do what she's not intimate with her husband, they publicize this every single day. Some say only on Shabbat, some say every single day in the community that she's a moredet, that she is a rebel woman that doesn't want to be with her husband. Why? Because there is, even though it's not an obligation like the husband, there is an understanding that that's the point of marriage to a certain extent. So the point being is that a good wife follows her husband, not vice versa. Now, as far as if the husband is a Ashkenazi, but he doesn't want to be Ashkenazi anymore, and he wants to be Sfaradi, that's already a completely different question. But if he is Sfaradi and his wife is Ashkenaziyah, she has to become Sfaradi. If the husband is Ashkenazi and the wife is Sfaradi, she has to become Ashkenazi. Whatever the husband is, that's what the wife has to be. Otherwise, she's going to be a problematic woman that is better off not to marry. It's better off to be single than to marry such a woman. I always thought about Dennis Prager only as a social theorist, not as a Jewish source for Judaism. It's so bad that he made public comments about Torah interpretation and application. Yes, you're right. Dennis Prager does not sound like a rabbi, but what I tried to explain to a few people that keep saying that Dennis Prager and the other guy, Ben Shapiro, and that other kid, what's his name? That other young kid, I keep forgetting his name. The little Zionist kid, what's his name? Whatever his name. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. The ones that I talked about, that they're not rabbis, but they discuss Torah. What I try to explain to people is that it doesn't matter if you're a rabbi or not. It doesn't matter if you're a rabbi or not. Once you mention the Torah in public, you are in essence putting yourself in a position where you're representing the Torah. Point. Period. That's it. Done. Even more so. Even if you're not speaking Torah and you're not representing the Torah, if you tell people that you're Jewish and the world knows that you're a Jew, by default, your actions are judged in accordance to the Torah. Meaning that if you do something that is forbidden according to the Torah, that is a magnified sin that is called Chilul Hashem. Even if you're not talking about the Torah. You don't have to talk about the Torah to desecrate the Torah. But the point is, once somebody mentions the Torah and says that tefillin are a part of a culture, or that they don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, or that the Mashiach is going to be some politician, or that the sages are just like them, that Rashi is not relevant, but Dennis Prager is relevant. This actually came out of his mouth. I couldn't believe it, but it actually comes out of his mouth regularly. Or that you're allowed to drive on Shabbat as long as it's to a Shabbat gathering. All these heretical things. These people became not a representation of the Torah, a misrepresentation of the Torah. That was a desecration of the Torah, desecration of Hashem, and we have an obligation not only to rebuke, but also to protest. These are two separate mitzvot. We have an obligation to rebuke people, and we have an obligation to protest against Chilul Hashem. And the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin says, "B'makom sheyesh Chilul Hashem, en kavod larav," meaning in a place that there is desecration of Hashem's name, even if they were rabbis, we wouldn't pay any mind to it. Needless to say, if they're not rabbis, we don't pay any attention to it. Once there is Chilul Hashem, we have to protest, we have to fight. It's an obligation on every single Jew. It's not just on me. Every single Jew is obligated to protest against these wicked people that are desecrating Hashem's name, even if they're not rabbis. But even if they were rabbis, that's not taken into account, and you still protest against them. That's what the Gemara says. That's what the law is. That's what the halacha is. Anyone who doesn't protest against it is not just missing an opportunity, but rather is a person that's empowering the wicked people and will get punished for it. So that's the vast majority of society has a lot of sins on their belt they don't even know, they're not even aware of. But as the Mishnah in Avot says, Shgagat Talmud Ola Zadon. If your mistakes, your sins are coming as a result of you not wanting to study, those sins are not mistaken, but rather they're purposeful sins. Can a Noahide learn Mishnah if it's a topic pertaining to the 7 laws? For example, laws of Avodah Zarah, idol worship. Rabbi Meir Bar Anes said a Noahide who learns Torah for the sake of knowing how to keep the 7 laws of law is like a priest. Since 7 Noahide mitzvot contain primarily negative commandments, can Noahides learn these Mishnayot to understand what not to do? The Noahide is allowed to learn laws that are pertaining to the Noahide laws, but the problem is that he needs to know where they are. And without a rabbi directing him exactly where to go, surely he's going to end up learning things that are not relevant to him and forbidden to him, and thereby he's going to be making a sin. So he has to make sure that he's very careful, and because he's walking on in between the drops here. He's walking in between the drops. The truth is that a person, the laws of Avodah Zarah pertaining to non-Jews are not so complicated like they are for Jews. Bottom line is, don't worship anyone other than Hashem. Don't worship money. Don't worship a people. Don't worship your body. Worship only Hashem. That's in so many words, that's the main thing. You don't need to necessarily go into all of the details of Avodah Zarah because some of it doesn't pertain to non-Jews. But if you're going to go into specific places in the Torah to talk about Noahides, you have to get some type of rabbinical supervision so you don't get yourself in trouble. Quite frankly, I've said this once and I've said it again and I always say it. Anyone that likes to learn a lot of Torah, especially the oral Torah, you have to convert. You have to convert. Because it's really ridiculous that people want to learn the oral Torah, but they don't want to convert. You have to simply convert, and that's it. If you want to learn the entire Torah, you have to convert to Orthodox Judaism and stop playing games. Because what ends up happening is that people start learning Torah, they start getting comfortable with Torah, they start asking the rabbis Jewish questions. The rabbis forget they're not even not Jewish. They even start welcoming themselves to the Jewish community. They go to people for Shabbat, they go to people for holidays, they start asking the rabbis, can I fast, can I not fast? They start living a fake Jewish life, and in reality they end up going to Gehenom for all of those mitzvot. So if you like to learn, then you have to do whatever is necessary to convert to Judaism and keep the entire Torah. And if somebody's gonna say, yeah, but what if I don't know if I'm gonna keep the entire Torah? If you like to learn Torah, that means that you can keep the entire Torah. But if you only want to learn the Torah for intellectual endeavor, then you shouldn't convert, and you shouldn't be learning either, because the Torah is not just a scholarly work. It's rules from God. How should a father teach or train his little boys about the whole issue of wasting seed, modesty, especially if they don't know what it is? 6, 8, 11-year-old. Okay, so already from the time where the kid understands you speaking to them, 2, 3 years old, 1 year old, depending on how developed your kid is, you should already train your kids not to touch their brit, not to touch their brit, not to touch their brit, not to touch it. It's very common for kids to touch their private part. They're investigating themselves. They're getting familiar with themselves, but you have to train them already from a young age that they're not allowed to touch it. Brit Kodesh, don't touch. That's the rule of the house. We don't touch. Once you have that, if you do that early enough, you already have half the battle. Why? Because once the kid knows, not allowed to touch that part, not allowed to look at that part, you simply know, the way we go to the bathroom is sitting down. We don't hold it. We don't touch it. We don't do nothing with it. Once that kid, you want to stand, you have to have a urinal. You can't have, the toilet seat, because then you're going to, destroy the walls. So the point is that you have to teach your kid not to touch the brit, and generally speaking, to become uncomfortable with their own body. That's one. Number two, once you teach that they're not allowed to touch it, even if it's not at 3 years old, even if you're teaching them that at 8 years old or 11 years old, not allowed to touch it. The older they are, the more they're going to ask you, why not? It says, because God said so. God said you're not allowed to touch it because if you touch it, you can make sins. And if you make sins, then Hashem will punish you. Now, depending on how old the kid is, you elaborate on that. Rabbi Akiva Shalom says that he would teach his children that Gehenom is fire, not necessarily the rest of the details, but just that Gehenom is fire already at 6 years old. That was his tradition in his house, that Gehenom is fire. So that your kids knowing that Gehenom is fire, that's already enough of teaching. You don't need to necessarily teach them about the demons and all the other details that I went into in some of my shurim. Gehenom being fire is typically enough for most children. That's enough for them to be scared of it. If you touch your brit, it's a sin. Hashem says not allowed because it's holy, and we don't touch things that are holy like the brit. Avraham Avinu didn't touch it. Yitzhak Avinu didn't touch it. Yaakov didn't touch it. Yosef, Moshe, and so on and so forth. We don't touch the brit. So he's going to ask you, okay, but Abba, how do I take a shower? How do I clean myself? You tell him, very simple. The way you clean yourself is use a sponge. Use a sponge and you clean yourself with the sponge. You never touch skin to skin. And you have to sit with the kid and you have to explain to him that not allowed to touch the brit. Why? Hashem doesn't like it. Hashem says this is holy, we're not allowed to touch it, because if we touch it, it's a sin. Now, as they get older and puberty starts to kick in, they start getting pubic hair and so on, and seed starts coming out of that part of their body. They're going to know that there is obviously more to it. So let's say, for example, in this case, you're 11 years old. You have to tell him, not only you're not allowed to touch it, but also you have to make sure to never even think about seeing anything immodest, any things. Also, you should train your little kids never to look at anything inappropriate, any immodest women, things like that. You have to watch your eyes. You have to watch your brit already from a young age. And your older one, you have to tell them you have to watch your eyes. You're never allowed to masturbate. You're never allowed to waste seed. Why? Let me show you why. And you start watching the lectures with them. For the 6-year-old that you have, and even the 8-year-old, I think that within 10, 15 minutes maximum, you could pretty much tell them everything I just said, and you're done. For your older one, and again, and possibly even for your 8-year-old, depending on how developed he is, you could start watching shurim with them that I made about Tikkun HaBRIT, about wasting seed, and watch it together with them and see if they have any questions about it, and answer their questions. And if you don't know the answer, you say, hold on, I'll ask the rabbi, and you send me the question, and I'll be happy to answer the question. But the point is that it all depends on how developed the kids are, both physically and mentally. But you have to teach them. You have to teach them before they end up having one of their classmates teach them. If you don't teach their kids, somebody else will teach them, and I promise you, it won't be kosher teachings, it won't be good teachings, and it'll be a disaster like the countless disasters that I deal with every single day of young people all over the world, both from religious backgrounds, non-religious backgrounds, Jewish backgrounds, non-Jewish backgrounds, that are addicted to pornography, addicted to wasting seed, addicted to homosexuality, promiscuity, and all types of filthy, horrific behavior that society has told them is good and even normal. So if you don't teach them, then the Satan is going to teach them. So you have to teach them. But again, you have to teach them based on their level. If they're normal 6-year-old, 8-year-old, probably it's enough to tell them that now to touch it, now to look at it, and wash it with a sponge when needed, and it's a sin to even do that, which is Gehenom is fire. That's pretty much it. Older one, you have to watch the lectures with him. You have to watch the lectures with him. He has to understand that there's more to it, because he already probably is seeing himself that his body is changing, and sometimes when he wakes up, there is something that is not urine and that's happening. So he has to know what's going on, and he probably doesn't feel comfortable asking you about it. I promise you don't want him to ask his friends, or even his teachers. So you want to be the one that teaches him this stuff, as uncomfortable as it is. That's why I say use the lectures as the icebreaker. Watch the lecture, icebreaker, and also empathize with the kid. Tell him, listen, I used to be a kid too. I also didn't know, and then one day I learned. Don't tell him how you used to sin when you were a kid because you didn't know. Pretend like you were just like him, clueless. Don't tell him that if you were a big sinner. Don't necessarily tell your kids that you were a big sinner. It's not good for education to tell your kids that you were a sinner. Let them admire you for as long as they can. All right, guys, I am kind of tired. My mouth is actually starting to hurt. Let me see if there's any. How is a Jew judged if they suffer from depression? How can a Jew support a brother or a sister who struggles from depression? A Jew is suffering. Jew suffering with it is a God-fearing, loving Jew. Depends. It depends why they're depressed. Why they're depressed? Are they depressed because of money? They're depressed because they're lonely. They're depressed because of chemical imbalance. If it's a chemical imbalance, then obviously try to help them and support them to hopefully seek professional help to give them some type of drug to stabilize them. If they're not to that extent and they're depressed about money or loneliness and things of that nature, then the best thing to do is to invite them to learn Torah with you, even if it's just for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or even if it's just you being in a room and watching it and they would overhear it. Because really their depression is self-inflicted as a result of their lackings of understanding of their purpose in the world. So it really all depends on where the depression is stemming from. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The depression is not a one-size-fits-all. There's different forms of depression. There's some people that are prone to depression because of chemical imbalance. There's some people that are prone to depression for different reasons. I could even say spiritual reasons. But that's if they were born at a specific time of the Shabbat star. Don't ask me what that means. I'm not going to go into it. The point is that even for those people, there is a solution. And the solution for those people is Torah. Because Torah is the main thing that makes a person happy. So generally speaking, for everything really, the Torah is a solution. Not for almost. For everything, the Torah is a solution. It's just that sometimes there's a physical issue that needs to be dealt with along with the spiritual. But needless to say, it all depends on what kind of depression. Okay, Rabotai Kareem, thank you very much for learning Torah with me. Anyone that asked questions and I didn't answer them, you could either just save them for next week or send them to me privately. I'm gonna try to answer when I can. I'm going to try to answer what I can, but again, remember, I have hundreds and hundreds of questions coming in every day. If I don't get to your question, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. I mean, the app, I haven't even answered questions from the app in probably a month. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are waiting for answers. At some point, I'm probably going to shut down the WhatsApp and only answer questions via the app. But I am having trouble making the transition because there's so many pressing issues that are coming through the WhatsApp that it's hard to ever get to anything else. Either way, may Hashem have mercy on us. May Hashem accept our prayers, accept our tshuva, accept our learning, elevate us higher than we could elevate ourselves. Thank you again for learning with us. Tiskuli mitzvot rabot, and may you enjoy the rest of the week and have a Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.
You know when you have a dream and you see a pretty woman? You've had that? Now you never actually see an ugly woman in dreams. It's always a pretty woman. And by the way, it's always the same woman for all of us. All of us have a dream of the same exact woman. And she's more dangerous than the Satan himself. Who is she? You're not even allowed to say her name. What are you gonna call her for?
It functions very much like drugs. People are addicted to it.
I tried to quit dozens of times, hundreds of times.
My fantasies and stuff, they're not mine anymore.
Cabinet ministers, judges, diplomats, even one of the country's top spies. These men are accused of some of the most sadistic child sexual abuse imaginable on hundreds of victims.
It shouldn't take over your whole life.
If you satiate it, you're never going to have enough. If you starve it and only feed it when it's permissible according to the Torah, you're always going to be happy.